Well, good morning, although it's not actually good morning. Normally it would be good morning. Normally I'm doing an 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock start, but it's actually 5:30. Starting out on a walk in the evening for reasons that I'll come to in a moment. But I'm on the flanks of a small hill called Creag Bhalg in the Cairngorms. This evening's walk up this hill, it's small. I'm starting at around 300 meters and it's only 668 meters high. So it's not a huge ascent by any stretch of the imagination, but as I've said many times before, size is no indication of greatness, and the position of this hill right at the foot of Glen Coich, looking up to Benvironment, into the Cairngorms towards Benvironment, and with panoramic views all the way around this part of D-side, it really is a view that's difficult to rival in this part of the world. Even if you go up all the big stuff on the plateau, you don't get views, I don't think, quite as astonishing as these. And I'm now aware I'm building them up quite a bit. So I hope conditions are nice at the top to actually give you a good view. The reason I'm starting out so late is because I've had a change of circumstances. Certainly since the last blog, which was crumbs, that was over a month ago, nearly 2 months ago, in the Lomond Hills, and before that on Ben Louis, when I was jobless and looking for another job. I have since found a job. Well, this is my new office. This is Mar Lodge Estate, west of Braemar, which many of you are probably familiar with as a starting off point for some of the munros from Linn of D or Linn of Coich. So I've been here a month. So this is my office. I'm going home. I'm still staying in my home is in Fife still, so I'm still going home on my days off. So the irony is that even though I'm here in this amazing place, I don't actually get a chance to go off and explore too much because I'm going home to Fife on my days off. So the option is, the obvious option I suppose, is to use the light summer evenings and come up hills straight after work. And that's what I'm doing. You can actually just see the summit through there. Like I say, it's not high, but I've kind of come, you see where the river is, River D, down there where it bends. The lodge is hidden from view, sort of just a little bit in. So it comes up a long way this way, climbs up onto the ridge, and then goes all the way along there. The Mar Lodge Estate is big, 29,000 hectares, which is about 7% of the whole of the Cairngorms National Park. It's Braemar is just down there, all the way down there at the end of this flat bit here. And it extends. This is the D coming up into the hills here. The D, of course, starts high up on the Cairngorm Plateau and then runs all the way out through here past Mar Lodge. The estate's got 15 munros, I think it is, and I mean it's big. It extends into the Larrig Grew, includes Ben McDouey, Benvironment, Cairntal, Scuanloch and Newen, and some really remote ones as well, like Anscarsach, the ones that are in the far southwest, around south of the Geldy Burn and Carnila. So it's got some really wild remote country, and if you sort of go out that way past Byneck Lodge and you come out at Tarf, and then that's the way into Glen Tilt. So there's thoroughfares converge here. You can come in from Glen Feshy, you can come in from Glen Tilt, coming from Aviemore over the Larrig Grew, coming from Tom and Towel over that way. There's lots of sort of historic rights of way, I suppose, all converge here. It's a bit of a bottleneck. Well, this isn't the top. Lovely spot as it is, it's not the top. The top is actually way over there, about 1 kilometre that way. The hill's about 4 kilometres long from end to end, and it's easy walking, pretty easy walking. It gets a bit more difficult towards the far end, as we'll see. I'm just going to walk along the ridge line, go all the way to the end, and then dip down into sort of a gash that links two glens called Cairngorm. Very, very lovely sort of defile through that links two glens. Really lovely place. It's worth going and taking a look at that. As is often the case with these big broad hills, you can sort of get up here and think, well, this is nice, it's an expansive view, and you're looking out to Benvironment over there and into the Cairngorms, and you think that that's your view, but you really should go and explore and get off the summit line, the ridge line a bit, off the broad flat plateau, and come and explore a bit further over here, because the view's massive if you can just get to see it. Oh, and then as you get over here and it starts to open up and you get a view down to Glen Coich, and you can actually see the trees, which you can't see when you're up there. Oh my life, what about that? It is, I would maintain, one of the finest views in the whole of the Cairngorms. I think just because the glen it's looking up is just so special and so unique. This is Glen Coich, with the Coich River coming down the middle of it. And like a lot of these glens, it's well, I say it's heavily wooded. It's more heavily wooded than most glens in Scotland, that's for sure. Lots of Scots pine are the mainstay of the trees down here, and it's just the most wonderful mix. I mean, it's beautiful to walk down and through it, but seeing it from up here and seeing this scale of woodland, which is something we just don't have in Scotland for the most part, it's only limited to a few remnant patches here and there. It's really, really nice to see, and it's not a kind of view, unless you go over to sort of Glenmore, the other side of the Cairngorms, or over to Abernethy, you don't get that view of, you know, a wooded glen. And especially now, I mean, you can see sort of, especially over here, all this birch that's coming through, and it's just this beautiful green colour, which all the broadleaf plants go, don't they, this time of year, May time, well, and the sap's rising and all this fresh growth coming out. Beautiful, beautiful thing. I mean, I know I'm always saying how much I love the winter, and, you know, summer is something that I suffer. But even I'd have to admit that this, I mean, in summer, we're getting into summer now, getting into June almost, that's an astonishing sight, and it's green and it's verdant and it's lush, and we know that there's a lot of wildlife down there that's enjoying this surging growth as we move into the summer. And to see sort of Highland Glen wooded with Scots pine and birch, oh, it's beautiful, really, really special, lovely place. But like I say, unless you come down off the ridge, you don't see it. So, you know, it's always worth coming off the edges of hills to see these things. Really, I could quite happily sit here for the rest of the evening, and that's exactly what I did a few weeks ago. It was this sort of time of day again. And I mean, the benefit is because it is quite hot. It has been quite hot today in the last few days, and it's nice to get relief in the evening from the relentless sort of the sun, if more than anything else. But then once you get towards the end of the day, and we're starting to get, you know, how you get the shade, the different hues of blue going back the way with each ridgeline. Each ridgeline is sort of a lighter shade of blue, isn't it? A lighter, paler hue. There's actually a word for it. Robert McFarlane, a writer, he's been for the longest while now on Twitter. He's got a really interesting Twitter account, and he tweets a word, sort of a nature or environmental word that you might not have heard of, or is in a different language, or it's a long lost word, or another word of sort of a British, Scottish, whatever word for something familiar that you might not ever have heard of. And he tweets one of these every day, and one of them was that, you know, this grading of hues going back the way. And I wish I could remember what it was, but I'll flash it up on the screen here now once I go back and actually look it up and what it is. But it's lovely that, you know, there is a word for it. But it is it's the nice thing. I mean, I'm not often up in the hills this late, and especially not in summer, because like I say, I don't do the bulk of my walking in summer. So actually coming up to Mar Lodge and getting this job and then sort of in a way being forced to sort of make use of the evenings and see the Cairngorms, see the hills in a different light, quite literally, is lovely. It's really nice. Yeah, so that big one is with the still got some snow patches on. That's Benvironment, of course, or Benvironment, depending on where you're from. Benarn behind it, which is massive bulk of it over that way. And then looking to this way, we're looking all the way up to the head of the glen, head of the Coich, and there's the tors of Benvironment, I think it is, sticking over the top there. That's looking up the Dhu Glen. And then we go over this way across Benvironment and Derry Cairngorm, looking all the way over to the massif where Ben Macdui resides. There's a chief reason that that glen looks the way it does, and also in a similar way Glen Louis, which is the next glen over, which we'll get a glimpse into a bit later. Lots of Scots pine coming up now, lots of big old granny pines, the big old pines that are hundreds of years old. But there's an active plan, I suppose, to encourage natural regeneration, natural growth of the woodlands here. And it's not, for the most part, being done with fences. It's being done by reducing the grazing pressure from deer. And that's why, certainly on this side of the estate, on the regeneration side of the estate, these glens, the deer control the cull to the extent that the grazing pressure is so low that saplings are coming up. I mean, you saw them on the way up, less so up here because we're getting up into sort of where you get scrub. This is up over 600 metres, pretty much at the maximum extent of the tree line, but there is, you see, it's birch coming up, so it's not just pine, broadleaf trees are coming up as well. So even up here, I mean, this is where the grazing pressure has been reduced, but if you certainly go further down into Glen Coich, Glen Louis, and then sort of down towards Linnadee and around that way, it's incredible how much regeneration is coming up. It's everywhere. And it just goes to show that if you do have a more natural grazing pressure, you know, where you haven't got hundreds of deer in one place overgrazing the landscape and preventing any saplings from coming up. I mean, because we don't have predators that can keep that kind of thing in check, it is down to landowners to step in and fill that role and actually keep the deer grazing pressure down. It's difficult, of course, when you're surrounded by other estates who don't have the same conservation priorities, I suppose. The NTS bought my lodge estate in 1995 and for conservation, but it was also, the condition of purchase was also it was going to be a sporting estate. So some people don't quite see how you can marry the two, but it's working in other places. I mean, Glenfeshie, where a very similar conservation aim is being pursued with amazing results. I mean, within a decade, you've got the woodland looking astonishing, coming up. And, you know, it is there, the seeds are there, the seed bank is there. And these trees, Scots pine, even in sort of boggy areas, which is quite contrary to the belief of where Scots pine tends to grow, is coming up, it's growing. What's really heartening is how, you know, when I'm working and speaking to people, and lots of hill walkers, when I ask them, you know, have you had a nice day, where have you been? They mention it unprompted, just how striking the regeneration is. And for the longest while, people thought nothing much was going to happen. But certainly in the last decade, the last 5 or 6 years, it's just gone whoomp. It's great, it's wonderful to see, you know, green, you know, the hills are greening up. It sounds like I'm gushing, and you're probably thinking, well, he's paid to say that. And this is, you know, this is what I do now. You know, I wouldn't have come to work at somewhere where I disagreed with what they were doing, and I was just thrilled to bits to actually, you know, go and work somewhere where you can see this happening. It's a very exciting place to be. It's an exciting place, it's an exciting time to work, because you actually see, you know, this policy which has been pursued for decades now, not just here but elsewhere in Scotland. You actually see it paying off. It's wonderful. Almost there. here we are, summit of Creag Bhalg, which is essentially either of these, I think. I forgot to point out, should have pointed out, way on the horizon, that's Loch Nagar over there, still with a bit of snow on its flanks. Well, come over the lip now and it's much calmer down here, but this gives wonderful views out across. Down here, that's where Linn of Dee is, down that way. Glen Louis goes up that way, up to Derry Cairngorm, up there. And it's Glen Dee all the way out that way. Just, again, like, unless you're over by Abernethy and Glenmore, you don't see that many trees. I mean, it's just, it feels like a proper wild place. It feels like a proper big forest. I mean, not if you're from the North America and the Europe, continental Europe. It's nothing. It's just like a small wood for on the North American scale. But for us, this is significant. It's beautiful. Really nice to see. Just heather bashing now. There is a path that runs down that way, and I was thinking maybe that would have been easier than doing what I'm trying to do now, which is get to this. There's a path that sort of cuts across here, and I did think maybe it's probably a better idea to use the path to go all the way that way and then come back, so using, you know, so I'm not wading through knee length heather. Oh well, I'm taking the direct approach. And that's also the thing with, once the grazing pressure is reduced, it's not just saplings which grow higher, it's the heather as well. Of course, because deer like to eat that and other things. So it's actually, it's part of the reason why, you know, people saying, why did it take so long for trees to appear? But the heather is rising at the same time the saplings are rising. So it seems like it's taken a long time for the trees to actually get up above the heather, if that makes sense, because that's growing too. Actually, as an extension of that point, I've heard some people say, as a sort of not an argument against natural tree regeneration or bringing woodland back to the hills, is more just an observation, I suppose, people, or a concern that people express, is that they're going to find it harder to get about because the heather's going to be longer, or they're going to have to be pushing their way through trees, or they're going to lose the views. That's also something I've heard expressed quite readily, that all of a sudden they're going to have dense bush and scrub all the way up the hillsides up to about 600 or more metres, and that it's going to completely change the character of the hills. And I think that is true. I think it will do. But you know, you're going to have clearings and that as well, and as you get higher up the hill, the trees are smaller anyway, so you're not going to get, it's not going to be like a dense conifer plantation that you get like Sitka spruce plantations. It's going to be there's going to be a spare amount of randomness about where the trees grow, if they haven't been planted, that is. So it's not going to be uniform cover, but I mean, personally, I just think it enriches the landscape immeasurably. It's good for flood prevention as well, of course. It's good for all kinds of things. It's good for wildlife. By the same token, if part of a landscape is reverting to woodland, it does mean that some species that like their landscapes without woodland are going to suffer, are going to miss out. So there is that balance to be struck. There might be some really niche species here that you realise that maybe it's worth keeping some of it unwooded because you don't find these species anywhere else. So there's still that aspect of management to woodland regeneration in Scotland, of course. But this bit here, up above the tree line here, and it's not a natural tree line because, as you can saw up there are trees, there are saplings coming up, but just as it is, there's a tree line here. It's gorgeous. Pines. Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? Look at these silhouettes in the distance. That's lovely. I suppose, I mean, I don't know if it'll ever get to the point here where it'll be like in North America, where I've been walking in Canada, where the bush, the broadleaf stuff lower down is so dense that you can't see what's going on there, and you hear massive things rustling in the undergrowth and you can't see what they are, and they're right next to you. It's a very unnerving experience if you're not used to it. But I think, you know, if it is going to get that dense, that's a long way off. you know, decades, if that, maybe more. And that's the thing with all this work that goes to regenerate our woodlands here, is it's something that's going to take decades and not hundreds of years. And as exciting as it is to be here now to see what's happening now, see the beginnings of it recovering, it's a shame, isn't it? You think you'd love to be able to come back in 100 years' time and see how it's doing. I've heard it likened to the building of cathedrals, where, you know, building these amazing structures, it took hundreds of years, and if you were involved in their construction, you were a very small part, a very small cog in a much bigger machine, but you never got to see the end product, the end result. Not that there's ever an end result where a natural ecosystem is involved, of course, but what an amazing thing it would be to see. Well, that over there is some strange form of shelter, and we'll be coming back this way actually, so I'll go past that a bit later, be coming up the way, but for now I'm going up here. It's just the strangest place to find a stone bench. It's a nice place to sit. Maybe have some coffee, some biscuits. Could get used to this, but then the midges aren't here yet. I haven't had any midge hatchings yet. There's a few around, but they're not biting. Won't be long though, maybe next week or the week after, but it's imminent. Lots of mozzies around though. Lots of mozzies biting, annoyingly. It's the thing about summer, isn't it? There's always something to spoil it. Right, I've fed and watered a bit, and now it's all this, which is the most arduous bit of the whole walk, to be honest, because it's very, very rough. Ordinarily it would be very wet, but I dare say it's a lot easier just now than it would be most of the time of the year, because it's so dry. So there's lichen crunching underneath my feet and moss crunching. It's been that dry. Oh, just look at all this with the cotton grass out. Oh, it's stunning. I don't know if you can see that on the camera or not. This wasn't out last week, so this has all come out very quickly. But yeah, like I say, it has been very, very dry, very warm. It's been, you know, 20 degrees plus for a week and a half, is it now? I've been here, this is 4 weeks now I've been here, and I haven't needed my waterproofs yet. And that's crazy, isn't it? I've needed them on a couple of days because it was cold, just to keep the wind out, but I certainly haven't needed it for the rain. And it's not to say it hasn't rained, it's spotted a bit over the last couple of weeks, but everywhere's bone dry, and so a big focus on the estate just now is fire prevention, speaking to people about having campfires and barbecues and that sort of thing. So there's been a lot of that, and a lot of nighttime patrols up the Coik and up to Derry Lodge, and policing, I suppose, fires, because I've seen some people, I've encountered some people having fires, and they're really lovely people, and they think they're doing the right thing by having a little stone surround made out of stones, you know, little stone fire pit, and then but they genuinely don't realise, and they admit as much, that they don't realise that on peaty ground, which is all of this is, the fire burns downwards as well into the peat, and even after they think it's out, they walk away and it's burning still. That's what happened here a few years back on the estate, when there was a massive fire went off on midweek. It was a weekend fire supposedly that had been put out, they thought, smouldered for a few days, and then the wind caught it. So it was a very real danger, and there's fires everywhere just now in Torridon, Lochcarron, I think there's some as well, Skye. Even back home, Lomond Hills, we had a big heath fire just the other week. So it is a real danger. So it's wonderful that it's so dry, and I can walk through here with dry feet, and just, it's very spongy, but it's not wet. Very weird though, being so dry. It won't last, and I don't know whether it's reward for all those people that suffered. I enjoyed, but lots of people suffered the winter, or whether we're getting it now and then there'll be a price to pay. Certainly the last time I was home, which was a few days ago, and checked my weather stats for this May compared to all the last previous 8 or 9 Mays that I've got data for at home in Fife. This May was certainly coming in at being the warmest of the last 9 years, certainly. And I'm sure that'll be borne out across the country, although there were anomalies, because east winds, so the east coast, Edinburgh in particular, getting the har. I think there was a day, was it Out Bay in the northwest was 26 degrees and Edinburgh was languishing at 10 degrees in the har. Don't know if you can hear that. Golden plover, there's 2 of them. Oh, it's a beautiful sound. Isn't that lovely? And with the cotton grass, the ridges disappearing in those hues, and the golden plovers calling. Isn't that lovely? And here we are at 8 o'clock on a May evening. Gave those plovers a wide berth. They were getting a bit agitated, so there must be a nest somewhere around here. My feet are getting swallowed up, my shins sometimes, in dry sponge. You can just imagine what it's like when it's normal, wet. Oh God, what a nightmare. Oh, what's that? Oh, look at this. Was that a fox? Oh my goodness. I never find things like this. I mean, I find antlers. Hang on, surely that's going to fit together. Look at this! I never find things like this. Wow. Is that a fox? I'm assuming that's a fox, isn't it? Wow. Prize find. Do you know, I wouldn't blame you for thinking that I planted that. I honestly didn't. I've never ever found anything like that before. I found antlers, yes, but skulls. Anyway, I was just about to say, this is Clashiernig. This is this gash between Glen Louis over there and Glen Coich over there. It's a much quieter place than the adjacent glens, which are quite busy. Really beautiful, lovely spot. Very quiet. It's a shame that I got here so late, because when the sun's more over this way earlier on, it shines down. When I was here last week, it was like that, and that lochen it was very calm, and with the blue sky, it was a rich blue colour. It was a beautiful view down here, really, really stunning. It's steep though. Thankfully, it's quite spongy. Just gonna quite easily get across in between these 2 lochens. It's lovely. I find in the Cairngorms, it's these, not just here, I mean, sort of, especially over that way towards Benvironment, there's these, it's the small glens that connect the bigger glens that are actually the real charmers. The little hidden nooks and crannies of the Cairngorms that are worth exploring, I think. handily. A proper path for the first time in ages. Well, this is us coming down into Glen Coich, and we were up there. That's Creag Bhalg, this ridge with the woods on the side of it. So we've come along the top of it and this way around here. So this is actually probably the most Spartan section of the whole glen in terms of, you know, trees and pines. There's very lush woodland down there and round the corner up that way. What we're going to do now is go down to the road, which is the Land Rover track, which is here, and then the path climbs up through this plantation and comes back up and sort of double back on ourselves and cross over in the big figure of 8. So where we were wading through that deep heather coming off the summit of Creag Bhalg, we sort of go back over that again. So we'll cross over where we came down. It's a big figure of 8. It's a nice walk. Something that I didn't know really until this week was how Creag Bhalg was going to be, it was sort of turned into a ski resort for a very short time back in the 1960s after that really cold winter in 62, 63. The then owners of the estate, Swiss brothers I think were they, Pancho's the name, they thought it would be a good idea to put ski toes, and they had 2 ski toes going up the other side of Creag Bhalg, the side we came up initially, the Mar Lodge side, the side the lodge is on. But 2 very, very lean winters followed and basically put an end to it. But at the time it was done with such enthusiasm that they thought that Benvironment here would make a good alternative for people other than going to Cairngorm. And that's why that monstrous track was bulldozed, a road was bulldozed all the way up, practically all the way up to the summit plateau. And when the NTS bought the estate in 95, one of the first things that was put into action was actually sort of covering up that scar and making an alternate path and actually sort of letting nature reclaim it. And now we do spot photography every year, I think, is it? To actually see how it's doing in terms of the vegetation growing back over it again. And it's taken decades. It does take a long time because it's at such altitude. But what was it's scary to think of it now, but it was a report I was reading that was done in the 60s. I don't know if it was by some sort of Highland or Cairngorms tourist initiative or something, but they were sort of basically outlining the strategy for recreation and making suggestions as to what you could do. And one of the things they were suggesting was actually using, Benvironment as a way of alleviating pressure on Cairngorm. And they're talking about having improved roads coming up Glen Louis, which is at the other side of Clairngorm, which is the way you go from Linn of Dee up to Derry Lodge there. So it's essentially turning that into a road, and then having a road coming through here, through Clairngorm. You just can't believe it. And then a road up the Coich. I mean, they're talking about, in very matter-of-fact terms, saying, and then we can put a road here and here and here, and it'll all be fine. We look back on it now with sort of much more enlightened eyes, I suppose. It's incredible to think you could have had roads coming up these glens and through somewhere like that. Amazing, scary. Thankfully, it never came to pass. And of course, there were other plans. I think to push a road maybe through Glen Feshy, to come out along the Geldy, and then where else would I wanted to put it through? Yeah, as a way of sort of pushing more roads through the Cairngorms, and thankfully that's never happened, because can you imagine? These white bags are for path upgrade of the Clairngorm path, this side and the other side. It's just the pressure, I suppose, of more and more people enjoying the countryside. Let's just look back, Benvironment. It's just starting to catch the sun again now. It's been in the cloud, it's just coming out for the last sun of the day. Lovely. There was a lot more snow up there until this week, really. There was quite a lot of snow in April and for the early part of May, and it hasn't been wet. And it's not usually, it's the wind and the rain and the mildness, that hairdryer action that puts pay to our snow patches, to our remaining snow. But this year, there was as soon as it went warm, there was quite a pronounced snow melt, and all the burns were very high and the rivers were high, and it's petered off now. But just this incessant warm temperatures, it's 15 degrees on top of the Munros. Suddenly the snow is now going very quickly, and I think there was a lot of optimism just last month, really, a couple of months ago after the April snow, thinking that maybe it boded well for this season's snow patches. I certainly thought as much back on Ben Louis in March. I'm not so sure now, it's all going very quickly. Anyway, got a climb through this alright, not particularly attractive plantation. Gets quite steep, and then we're back out onto Creag Bhalg's open ridge again. It's so warm. It's that lovely fresh smell. So still in here, which is nice. It'd be nice if it was a bit fresher. I'm sure there'll be a breeze once we get out. Anyway, as you can see, it's not the nicest section of the walk, but you're out of it quite quickly. Funny little shelter with somebody's shoes in it. Anyway, I think this is a fitting place to end, seeing as the batteries are running down and the sun is setting. Really nice walk. Hopefully it will. I don't think really that many people who watch this need convincing of the merit of smaller hills, but I think this one, it's very broad, very wide, very long, but the views it gives into the Coy, Benvironment, to the plateau, and then down into Glen Louis and Glen Dee can't be beaten, really. It is now 9:10, so I've got a nice walk back. Sadly I won't be able to show you my favourite tree, this standing deadwood tree, really photogenic, but I'll just have to save that for another time. Right, back home.